Hello chess friends and welcome to Azadov Chess channel and welcome to a spectacular game from the Computer Bullet Chess Championship in 2023 that you can follow now on chess.com. We have here the latest version of Stockfish, the powerful Stockfish 16, battling it out against another top engine Rubi in an amazing Réti opening, and this game is so wild, really words cannot describe this game. It's so sharp, it's so tactical, it's so brutal all over the board. Put your seatbelts on and enjoy again in a wild attack play by Stockfish 16. So let's see now what happened with the white pieces. The fish opened with the move knight to f3. Rubi's response was d5. We have c4 immediately hitting the center. c6 going into the Slavish structure. c6 supporting simply the pawn on d5. We have g3 going into the fianchetto variation, which is now common idea, I think, to allow maybe even black to take d takes c4, but then of course storm with your centralized pawns. The support of the bishop getting use, of course, of the activity of the light square bishop on this diagonal. We have knight to f6, normal development, bishop to g2, a6, kingside castling, and now the prearranged move order was now still the move d takes c4. So the engine had to play this particular position. Stockfish continued with a4, simply not allowing immediately this structure to be healthy, because if black somehow manages to cement a position around the square b5, cement simply the supported pawn on c4, then I think white will have a tough time. 4 pawns are storming here on the queen side against 2 pawns here of white. So in my opinion, white needs to be careful, at least stop the progress for a while. But the main advantage, of course, for white is when black is taking now the pawn on c4 is that white is here this dominant position in the center of the board, has now of course this 2 versus 1 pawn majority in the center of the board. We have h6, queen to c2 by the fish, simply hitting the pawn on c4. And you see now the idea about this move h6 is to develop the bishop here on e6. Now the bishop is not endangered by possibilities like knight to g5. We have knight to a3 by the fish, hitting simply further the pawn on c4. Rubi supports now the pawn on c4 with the move b5, and Stockfish continues also with the common plan, knight to e5, liberate simply the long diagonal for the light square bishop, and hits now the weak pawn on c6. The defensive idea here is many times to lock this diagonal with bishop to d5 or knight to d5 are common defensive ideas to simply not allow white to spread his wings on this long diagonal. But Stockfish has of course still opportunities. e4, simply kicking with the bishop. Now we have bishop to e6, and now the fun already starts. So Stockfish plays now a beautiful move which really surprised me. Stockfish played now very aggressive move d4. Very wild stuff. So d4 in the beginning seemed really strange to me, because I thought, okay, what's going on? Why would anyone push d4? Queen can take on d4. We can also take en passant c takes d3. So what's going on? So let's see first of all options if black would have continued with c takes d3. Rubi didn't play that. Rubi played queen takes d4, but that was really interesting. Let's see. After c takes d3 en passant, we have now this one, knight to d3. You're trying maybe to play the move g5. The problem about this whole setup with the move bishop to e6 that you cannot play this normal e6 move in order to develop the dark square bishop. You have to develop your dark square bishop in sort of a fianchetto way, and now you play maybe something like g5. But now look at this, the knights are coming into the game. That's now the issue about this line, because the knight is now suddenly rerouted to a very powerful square, to the square on c5. Here we have maybe this continuation bishop to g4, but now look at this, white has the attacking flow e5. You have to play again knight to d5, again locking out now this diagonal, and now we play something like e6, and I think the whole position is falling apart. Look at this, queen to g6 is going to happen. So it's a devastating position. So after move d4 by the fish, let's see also options if black simply ignores this whole idea in the center of the board. Let's see, maybe this idea, knight if g6 would have happened by black, then simply bishop to f4, normal development, bishop to g7. Let's see really what would have happened if black wants to castle in a fast way. Now a takes b5, a takes b5, but now knight takes g6 is an opportunity. So really tricky lines are possible here. Maybe something of this is useful to you. Maybe you reach sometimes this position, but look at it, knight to g6, really possibility. This wasn't played, as I said, in the game, but we want to of course also study some opening theory here. After f takes g6, you can even sack the other knight. The rook is endangered, and now after something like, I don't know, a rook to a1, we have this intermediate attack against the king. The king has to step back. Now we pick up the rook. We are down a pawn, but this pawn is weak. This bishop will be taken. The pawns are very mobile here in the center of of the board. You can maybe try queen to d7, but now we simply continue the pressure here. Maybe c3, rook to c8, and now after knight to e6, queen to e6. I think still that this is very, very dangerous for black to handle. Although black has an extra piece, but white has this powerful center control, will eventually play also rook to a8, and you have to step back. Now look at this, h4, king to h2, bishop to h3. So I'm not saying black or white have to play this the particular line, but I think in many of these lines white will simply be on the aggressive side, white will be simply on the attacking side. So that was our analysis after potential d4 moves. So you see, in my opinion, c takes d3 en passant, or to ignore the threats with g6, bishop to g7 is simply too slow. White will put simply too much pressure here against black's king. So that's why Rubi took. Rubi took the pawn on d4. Stockfish continues now with bishop to f4. Normal development. We have now the move g5. Rook from f to d1. Intermediate attack against the queen. Stockfish still plays very, very active chess. We have queen to b6. And now comes another stunner here by the fish. Stockfish plays a takes b5. Simply ignores this attack against the bishop. Wants to simply make something out of this because black needs still at least 2 more moves in order to castle. Black still needs to play bishop to g7 and kingside castling. Stockfish is not allowing here black to breathe. Stockfish is not allowing here Rubi to castle. Very, very spectacular attack so far by Stockfish 16. So we have g takes f4. Rubi is saying, show me what you got, but now Stockfish continues with knight to c4. If you play here bishop to c4, immediately this wouldn't be good. Then after knight to c4, queen to b5, this one is a problem. e5 would have happened. You play something like, I don't know, knight to d5 again, here to lock the diagonal. Then we play rook to a5, attacking simply the piece. And look at this. Again, very, very messy position. Look at this. Bishop to d5, knight to c6, bishop takes c6, queen to c6, and now knight to d6 is winning the game. Even if you try to get the king connected to the queen, we'll simply play this one. Knight to e8, discover check, and the queen will be taken. And I think white has gained decisive material, and this is game over for black. So this was our analysis, for instance, after this potential bishop takes c4. So after move knight to c4, that's why Rubi played here queen to c5. Stockfish still continues the attacking flow with a beautiful b4. If you play queen to b4, then again, very, very messy. e5, you have to again lock this diagonal. Many times black is simply relying on this defensive resource to somehow, as I said in the beginning, lock simply the light square bishop out of game. But now it's still working after b takes c6. The knight is not protected now anymore by the pawn. The knight is twice attacked. You could maybe try, I don't know, knight to c7, but then queen to d3, very dangerous. We simply open up the position. The queen is coming into the game again. A messed up game again here for black. So after move b4, again, black doesn't have time to pick up another pawn. So that's why Rubi retreated here to h5. Stockfish continued with e5. Again, if you play here now, finally knight to d5, the whole defensive concept like this previously we have seen is simply not working because of this opportunity. B takes c6, and again the knight is twice attacked. So that's why from e5 Rubi had it enough. Rubi says, I'm going out of this mess. I will simply play now finally bishop to g7 and secure my king by castling. Stockfish continues with b takes c6. Stockfish doesn't even want to take the knight on f6. Stockfish still relies on this most powerful minor piece, simply relies on the beautiful bishop's activity. For instance, if you would have played e takes f6, still white should be better, but it's not so dangerous anymore. Black will probably get out of this mess. Maybe you can try to attack it in this way, maybe rook to b4, but now castle. This is maybe playable for black. Maybe black can stop somehow this annoying pawn on the c file, but we have to say it, black has also great counter attack chances with this beautiful bishop here that's crossing all over the board, and now finally the king is secured. Even if I think black has to sacrifice maybe even the rook for the pawn here, still I think black will have enough compensation, because there is also the opportunity maybe to attack this side of the board. So I'm not sure, but as I said, the Stockfish engine simply played, I think, the more powerful line played simply b takes c6. Simply, as I said, plays on the beautiful bishop's activity. We have now finally kingside castling. Stockfish now finally takes e takes f7. E takes f6. We have bishop to f6, and now a rook from a to c1 simply putting more pressure on the c file and supporting now the passer here on this file. We have rook to a7. Stockfish continues with knight to b6. f3 by Rubi. Very interesting idea, very interesting counterattack also by Rubi, hitting the bishop, but again Stockfish ignores it, plays now a beautiful c7, and the problem is now you don't have time to pick up the bishop, because then this one would have happened. Rook to d8, we have bishop to e5, and now we simply promote a new queen after a couple more moves. White will also get the size of material here, and I think this is again game over. You have to step back. Rook is coming into the game. The queen is protecting the d1 square, so it's simply a messed up game again here for black. So after move c7, that's why we have bishop to e5 by Rubi, getting this bishop into the defense. We have c8, the promotion. Interesting choice here by the Stockfish engine, that Stockfish promoted to rook, maybe also mocking a little bit here this other engine. We have bishop to c8, knight takes c8. We have rook to c7, hitting the queen. Stockfish plays this intermediate attack. Black has to take out now the knight, and now finally bishop to f1. And this is really spectacular. Stockfish created all of this mess, all of this madness, just in order to reach this position. The material is still about equal, but we have to say it again, White has a better activity. First of all, what we can notice is, of course, that White has already occupied the open files, has a better bishop. Black has this weak pawn, has also some weaknesses in front of the king, and we have to say all of this f3 pawn is still somehow dangerous for White, but sometimes when you advance pawns, it can be also your problem in the continuation of the game. Now Stockfish is of course having a new target also somehow to grab simply the pawn on f3. So we're now in move 26, and so many brutal things have happened. A very spectacular game so far, but you see in this top engine games, sometimes they're playing the wildest games just in order maybe to get a tiny little advantage in the middle game stage. Now Stockfish has, I think, a better position, but you have to prove your point, of course, in this particular game. So here bishop to g7 by Rubi. Stockfish continues the pressure. We have rook to e6, rook to c4, with the idea is of course to play with this rook, shifting it all over the fourth rank. We have queen to g6 by Rubi, and now knight to c2. Stockfish is of course searching for improvement of the minor piece, searches for good scores, maybe e3, d4, maybe even f5 if the position allows it. I think in this position you want somehow to reroute the knight on this f5 score. This would be the optimal score simply for the piece. We have knight to c6, Rubi does the same, of course also activates the further its pieces. Knight to e3, knight to e5, rook to f4, we have rook to b8, and now h4. h5, Stockfish plays now knight to d5, also a very interesting score for the knight. The issue is always that the main tactical goal now is to play something like bishop to h3, and for instance if this rook moves somewhere, then there is also the possibility of knight to e7 fork. So it's also a very important tactical shot that we should notice. We have king to h7. Rubi gets out of this potential fork on e7. We have bishop to h3, hitting now the rook on e6. And what should you do? For instance, if you play here bishop to h6 in order to somehow play counterattack, also bishop to f5 is a huge threat. So it's simply not working. So that's why for bishop to h3, Rubi had to play now knight to g4, but now finally rook takes f3. All of this mess Stockfish created just in order finally to create some kind of an unbalanced game to get an extra pawn, and from this point on I think this becomes simply a one-way ticket here in White's favor. Now also there is a threat of knight to f4, the fork against the queen and the rook. Rook to d8 here by Rubi. We have knight to f4 anyway. Rook takes d1, queen to d1. Rubi found a way how to get out of this mess with rook to d6. We have queen to b3, queen to f5, and now bishop to f1. Again, Stockfish is searching for an improvement of the minor piece, is trying to activate the bishop in a even on a better score. We have king to h6. Rubi gets out of this mess on light scores. We have knight to h3, hitting the queen. Queen drops back, and now queen to c2 is of course not allowing anymore Black's king to step back on light scores. We have bishop to f6, rook to f5, hitting now also the weak pawn on h5. rook to d5, and now after rook to d5, queen takes d5, bishop to a6. Stockfish has now 2 extra pawns, and I think this should be now completely winning endgame here for white. Here Rubi played king to g7, knight to f4, queen to e5, queen to c5, trying to trade off the queens, and Stockfish finally did it. After knight to knight to e5, we have now an opposite color bishop's endgame, but still, this is a passer. Stockfish simply pushed the pawn further. We have king to h6. You have to also now protect the h5 pawn. Meanwhile, White's king is more active. White king has the possibility to play much more freely than Black's king, because this is a really weakness. This one is weak, so the position, I think, is really collapsing here for Black. We have b6 by the fish, bishop to d6, knight to d5. Stockfish, of course, gets this king very active. Knight to f6, knight to c6, and now finally b7, knight to e5, bishop to b5, and after a couple more moves, Stockfish decided even to trade off the knights. Very interesting choice. But although these are, as I said, opposite colored bishops, and many times these types of endgames are leading into drawish positions, still this is simply too much to handle here for Rubi, because Stockfish had really beautiful idea here in mind. Played first of all f4, and after a couple more moves, and after move king to g6, Stockfish found a beautiful winning idea. Maybe you can, just for fun, if you like, pause the video and try to see now the winning endgame idea here for White. White moves and wins the game. What would you do now in this particular position? It's really crazy. Okay, the winning idea is actually bishop to e8, pinning this pawn. Here Rubi tried to escape, and Stockfish simply sacked the bishop in order to create, of course, here some kind of a mess. Rubi didn't even take. I'm not sure why. Probably it calculated it could maybe prolong the game if it doesn't take the bishop. But let's see what happens. For instance, if you play king to f7, then we simply push the pawn on g4, and we have now 2 pawns that are rolling. For instance, you try bishop to d6, we simply put push the pawns. And now, for instance, after bishop to e7, there's also an interesting way how to win this endgame. You can play even f6 here, the fork against the bishop and the king. You have to take, and now we play king to f5, and the bishop doesn't have any more access to the e5 square in order to prevent the potential promotion here on b8. Very wild stuff. So this was one of the methods, as I said, simply creating a passer here, 2 passers here on the f file, and also on the g file with push simply the pawn on g4, and it would be game over. But Rubi, as I said, didn't take. Stockfish simply grabbed another pawn, pushed now the pawns till the end. Here I think we can agree this is really game over, and after a couple more moves here, Stockfish delivered checkmate here with queen to b2. So really great game, really wild attack in the beginning. You see how sometimes in these top engine games things seems that it's really in one that one engine is simply destroying another, but they're still getting this position into, I don't know, playable end games. But still, this is really spectacular in my opinion so far. One of the best chess games played by Stockfish 16 for sure. So okay, in this computer bullet chess championship, as usual, Stockfish is in the lead, has now really comfortable situation. Probably Stockfish will win a new competition in the computer chess world, but this was really, I think, one of the most impressive games from this tournament for sure. So okay, if you want to see more epic and brutal chess games played by Stockfish and also by some other top engine, check out our commented chess games played by computer series. Here's the link of our playlist, and if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and what do we say? Chess is the best, of course.